Christmas truce. Nothing can stop the spirit of Christmas. From 1914 to 1918, a war broke out. This was the Great War. The Allies and Central Powers were fighting. There were several reasons for the war to begin, such as militarism, imperialism, nationalism, and alliances. The final spark for the war was the death of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his wife, Sophie Ferdinand, and their unborn child. In 1914, compromise arose amidst the conflict when the soldiers stopped the war for Christmas.
The Great War, World War I, officially began on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie Ferdinand lost their lives in Sarajevo. They were in an automobile when a 19-year-old boy named Gavrilo Princip took action. Princip shot and killed them at point-blank range, then he turned the gun on himself. Soon after, a bystander threw himself in front of the gun. The police took Princip in. After the assassination of the Ferdinands, it set off a rapid chain of events which would lead to war. World War I was in the top 7 of the bloodiest wars in world history, but even this could not stop the spirit of Christmas. Russia was supporting Serbia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia, but later was denied. On June 28, 1914, Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia for the second time, and this was the start of World War I, which is characterized by trench warfare. This is warfare that the world had never seen before. Trench warfare is a type of fighting where both sides dig deep into the ground as a defense to the enemy. The World War I trenches would stretch for many miles. This made it almost impossible for one side to advance to the other. No one is going to stick their head out of the trenches for someone they don't respect or trust. You can get shot doing that, Gordon Bethune stated. The main cause of death were airplanes, chemical warfare, and various types of firearms, such as Spandau, Vickers, Lewis, and Parabellum. Some soldiers died from trench fever and trench foot. Trench fever is a clinical illness caused by infection with Bartonella quintana. Some symptoms are fever, headaches, sore muscles, sore bones and joints, outbreaks on the skin, and chest and back pain. Trench foot is a medical condition caused by an extensive exposure of the feet to damp, unsanitary, and cold conditions, and between both trenches was no man's land. No man's land was full of landmines and barbed wire.
The following video clip shows what World War I might have looked like during the Christmas truce.
Traute hochheilige Paar, Holy Infant, so happy and love, sleep in hellish peace.
We'd been out of our trenches for 4 days, rest, and returned on the 23rd of December to relieve some regular troops, writes a soldier in a letter back home. On Christmas Eve, the usual war methods went on all day, sniping, etc., until the evening, when we started a few carols and old home songs, stated Private Edgar Appelin. All around them, the bombs were bursting in the air, people were screaming, men were dying. But on Christmas Eve, 1914, the German and British started to sing Christmas carols back and forth to each other across the lines. They first sang, "O Come All Ye Faithful," then the Germans joined in singing the song in Latin. At around 2 a.m., a German band played some tunes like "Home Sweet Home" and "God Save the King." At the dawn of Christmas Day, the Germans peeked their heads out of the trenches, which must have been the first time in weeks, and said, "You no shoot, we no shoot." The Germans laid down their rifles, emerged from their trenches, and kept repeating, "Happy Christmas," in their native language. At first, some of the Allied soldiers thought they were being tricked, until they saw the Germans unarmed. The soldiers got out of their trenches and shook hands with the Germans. The men exchanged gifts, such as cigarettes, plum pudding, cake, bottles of wine, and took photographs. Some of the soldiers gave each other a postcard as a souvenir with their name and address on it, so they could meet each other after the war was over. They also played football, which is known to us as soccer. They repaired trenches, dugouts, and buried the deceased. The truce was in Ypres only. Along the Western Front, the fighting continued, and approximately 81,000 casualties occurred on Christmas Day. Some of the officers were unhappy about the truce and worried that it might undermine the fighting spirit. When one is in the front line, one cannot help but having fairly deep sympathy for the wretched fellow in the other front line, stated an officer from the German side. Both sides were not fighting each other's beliefs, but rather the beliefs of their leaders. They could not hold a grudge against their enemy for long.
World War I was a very destructive war, but it also created many surprising developments, such as medicine, geopolitics, and social relationships. World War I was as destructive to the countries of Europe as it was to the soldiers who fought in the trenches. However, with time, the countries were soon able to come up to a truce of their own. War's reparations were paid, and the destruction was rebuilt. Just like the Christmas truce, the peace did not last forever. Many countries struggled with their debts, and in just 20 years, World War II began, an even deadlier war caused by the devastation of World War I. The live and let live system flourished along the Western Front. It created short truces of peace between opposing sides, allowing soldiers to gather the dead and repair their trenches. Although these truces drove those at high command furious, the sympathetic nature of their soldiers made them impossible to eradicate. The Christmas truce was the greatest of all, uniting the most soldiers and releasing the most care ever seen on the Western Front.
From 1914 to 1918, a war broke out. This was the Great War. The Allies and Central Powers stopped the fighting, and this left 37 million people, both men and civilian, lying dead on the cold, harsh ground. The Allies defeated the Central Powers after 4 long years of death, destruction, and mayhem. The war ended on November 11, 1918, with the signing of armistice. The soldiers didn't expect to stop fighting, but even World War I couldn't stop the spirit of Christmas.